So don't listen to what anyone says about environmental impact and so on. Like there was a tweet the other day where someone was offered $1 million or something to make NFTs and they turned it down because it's like, oh, it's too much of my conscience. It's like, ooh, that money's just going to go to someone else who probably doesn't care about the environment, right? And then the whole talk about like, oh, you're minting something and you're creating this much emissions or so on. It's not a direct thing that happens regardless of you doing the transaction or not. There's so much misinformation or like nuance to it that it doesn't really get communicated very well. And so people are like, oh, NFTs are evil, we shouldn't touch them. Even then, there are ways to create them without doing any of that.
All right, what's up, everybody? I am Justin Murphy, and this is the Other Life Podcast, the coolest podcast in the world about philosophy, technology, and internet culture. So this week's episode is with Cryptopathic. He's a young man. He's only in his early 20s, but he's a well-known crypto trader who got very wealthy trading crypto starting at the late age of 15 years old. He famously called the Bitcoin top in 2017, and so he's amassed a fairly large following in crypto Twitter. Now, what's less known, though, is that he has pretty deep roots in weird internet meme culture. Like he's a observer of frog Twitter and stuff like that. So he's pretty with it. And he's also an Urbit investor, which is not well known at all. So we talked all about these things, and we talked about how meme culture informs his trading strategies. We talked about NFTs. We talked all about how artists and intellectuals should think about developing crypto projects. We talked about what he's most bullish on, what he thinks is going to stand the test of time amid all of these crazy hype bubbles that you're seeing right about now. So yeah, this was a really fun one. There are a lot of very interesting little gems here, I think, if you listen closely. Obviously, none of this is financial advice whatsoever, just so we're clear on that. And yeah, go follow Path at Cryptopathic on Twitter. That's where he hangs out for the most part. And if you're watching on YouTube, please take a quick second just to subscribe real quick and then click the little bell to get notifications. A lot of you are still not subscribed or you haven't clicked the bell. So just do that so you don't miss any future shows. And if you're listening to the podcast audio, please take a second, go and leave a review on Apple Podcasts if you would. All you have to do is go to otherlife.co/review. All right, that's all I got. Thanks for listening, folks, and on to the show. All right, so Path, you are a young man. You're in your early 20s. You're already quite wealthy from crypto trading. You have, a lot of followers on Twitter, something like 150,000. And I wonder if you could just, for our audience, give us a quick TLDR on, your rise to power. What were the big trades you made that were, really significant? And also, how that intersected with, the internet clout that has come along with that. Just give us the TLDR of that story.
Okay, so I started trading crypto when I was about 15. I got into Bitcoin quite early. I started trading altcoins. I made a lot of money on altcoins, and then I put that into Bitcoin, and then I wrote that up. And then I've been dabbling with Ethereum and NFTs more recently. I'm very into collectibles and NFTs as of late. And most recently, I made NFT, which is a fractionalized Doge NFT. And that's done very well. So I'm sure we'll talk about that.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, we'll definitely have a segment on that. It's a very interesting project. But give us a little bit more detail just for people who maybe don't, they're not deep in this like crypto Twitter world. Like I'm sure there were kind of momentous moments in your trading history that were particularly crucial. Just unpack it a little bit more.
Okay. So I started trading with about $100 or so. And I traded that up to, I think, a few thousand end of 2013, and I lost most of that. So most people, when they start trading, is they'll have huge mistakes, and they'll learn from that. Because I think the best way is probably you learn from your own mistakes, then you really learn. There's a lot of risk involved in crypto, so you have the huge risk and reward there. But that's why it like drew me into it so much. It's like why do I need to get a normal job when I can just do this? So in my high school years, I was very focused on trading. Didn't get very good grades because of it. And yeah, so there was one coin called Vericoin back in 2014, and I traded that. I made more than 100x on it.
What was it called?
And then Bitcoin, Vericoin, VERI.
Okay. It was just a random shitcoin, or was there anything to it?
Yeah. So, my idea at the time, it was like, well, the developers are quite interesting. They had sort of novel ideas, but they weren't technically that impressive. It was mostly just marketing. But back then, you had things like like Dogecoin existed back then, right? So there were a lot of coins back then that didn't do anything, and they still did really well because they had like a picture of a cat or something on them. So the the bar wasn't very there wasn't much to qualify you for like a good investment. So I found like a good team and I bought into that quite early on, and then they did very well. Very quickly did very well. Made 100x on that and sold it, and so that was what I was aiming for, and I managed to get it quite early on. And then I kept all that in Bitcoin for quite a while, and then Bitcoin eventually took off as well. So then that was another 100x or so. And then from there, I've been more sane with my risk management and more diversified. But yeah, kept going, kept trading in crypto.
Okay, cool. And what were you gaining a following on the internet at the same time? Was it just
Yes.
And so what were you doing exactly? Is it just
so I was tweeting about all these trades as it was going along. On crypto Twitter, which itself has grown massively. I've gained a following over the years, tweeting about all sorts of trades and ideas I have about the markets and so on. I've got some quite famous charts out there. Like I called the top on Bitcoin back at the end of 2017 very accurately. I laid out my ideas about why and so on. And then that's called the curse chart. And a lot of people know me for that. So I've got quite a good hold on the market, and people, I think, respect me for that. So I kind of have like a cult following almost at this point. It's kind of scary.
Excellent. All right. Thanks for that, giving us the TLDR there. Yeah, you're something of a legend in crypto Twitter, and I just wanted my audience to get a good sense of that. So I was actually very pleasantly surprised to learn that you're a longtime listener of the podcast, which is really cool. And I learned a little bit more from you that actually you're kind of an OG of kind of weird Twitter and meme culture and frog Twitter and all of that. So I want to talk a little bit about that because we have some kind of interesting cultural overlap that people might be surprised to learn about. So let's start with this. Do you think there are any interesting parallels between meme culture and frog Twitter and those kinds of internet subcultures and crypto? Might you even say that meme culture taught you some things that you carried over into your trading strategies?
Well, I think they're definitely very counterculture in a way. They go against what's generally accepted. That seems to be the main difference. And I'm very interested in following stuff like that. I just enjoy it a lot. So they never really they never really crossed over in the past, which I found quite interesting. Like I did try to teach people from that part about Bitcoin, but no one really wanted to listen years ago.
That's weird, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's odd. Because it seems to sort of fit in like ideologically. It's like you get your own money, it can't be censored by anyone. Especially when it comes to like social media platforms that can't be censored, right? Like everyone has gone over to Gab, but it's like, well, these things already exist in the crypto space and you can use them, and there's no essential point of failure or whatever, but nobody seems to, it's odd. But then you have stuff like Urbit now, so people are catching on to that. Like you're pushing that as well. That's cool. Yeah,
we'll talk. I want to talk about Urbit because I know that it's something you're interested in. I think we'll do a whole little segment on that in a little bit. But when you were trying to talk to the other frog Twitter people like Contbot or whatever about crypto, why do you think people like him and that world are surprisingly so anti-crypto?
There's some, I think, moral pushback against it. Like they see it as it's very like capitalist, or like people just like profit seeking really, and it's not sincere. Maybe like you could view it that way. There's some people don't like the environmental implications of it, which is a debate in itself. It goes on forever. There's a lot, and also a lot of people just don't understand it.
That's part of it for sure. I kind of sometimes get the vibe that some of those people in frog Twitter just kind of hate anyone who's kind of successful. And like, it's like, it's like anyone who's like making money doing something new and interesting is kind of seen as like, they're put in the category of like the alpha Chad guy at high school who like beat them up and or something like that. I don't know. That's one kind of folk theory, but it is kind of interesting because some people from that world have kind of pivoted into crypto, which is also kind of interesting. You told me some interesting stories about Like, what do you know about that? Like, you told me some interesting stories of some people. How would you explain or give us a sense of what you know about those people who have moved from frog Twitter meme culture into crypto?
So I know Sam Hyde sort of swapped over. Well, he started trading crypto a while ago, but like if he sees the money, he's happy to go and get it. Right? He doesn't really have any. There's no barriers in his mind to like going and getting something like that if he sees the opportunity. A lot of other people, they just don't really want to. There's
Did you tell me
now we have.
he made money off of like buying Chainlink, was it, and Bitcoin?
I think he did really well with Chainlink. Yeah, from what I'm aware of.
Was he really early? Like, how early? Do you have a sense?
There was a video of him talking about it back when it was like $2, I think, like quite cheap. So yeah,
Interesting.
I'm sure he's. But like he was in, because I think he made a parody of Bitcoin back in like way back, like 2013 or something. He was like making fun of it. So obviously he was aware. Most people were aware of Bitcoin back in the early days. So like if you know, like Drill, that old Twitter account. Right, he made a Bitcoin tweet in 2011 when it was like $1, and like I doubt he's made any money off of it. He's like another one of the people who like they're aware of these things, but they sort of only they're only aware of it in order to make fun of it, and then sort of like get likes or something. They're not interested in actually using it for their own benefit, like monetarily or any other way. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting in particular because it's the crypto economy is so mimetic. It traffics in memes, and the logic of mimetic contagion is really important in especially kind of trading altcoins and that kind of thing. So you would expect there to be more overlap or more people moving from that world into crypto. But yeah, there are some I think there are probably some more. I'll have to maybe search out some with NFTs. You think that's kind of a game changer?
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you think of examples or?
Oh, okay. So, well, Sam Hyde again. He made one of the shooter meme. He made that into an NFT, but then he sort of made it into performance art because he only tweeted it out. He only put it on his Instagram story, and then since then he hasn't talked about it. So there's no way to actually verify it's his unless you saw it at the time. So it's like it's sort of just lost. But yeah, like what examples? Yeah, memes in general, like you can now monetize these things if you have like social power on the internet. Before, like maybe you wouldn't be able to get anything off of it, but like, so like the person who took the picture of Doge, like they've made millions now. Guy who made Trollface, he sold his for a stupid amount of money. Matt Fury sells Pepe, like he's made millions of it as well. So now all these people are sort of like getting the recognition they deserve, I think. And like and the money that comes with that, yeah.
So, as someone who pays close attention to the space, how do you think about how do you think creators should think about crypto as an opportunity? Because I think one of the reasons why a lot of people who are deep in internet culture and maybe even quite prolific, quite admired, have really interesting projects and have loyal fan bases, but they're not crypto savvy. They kind of just look at the whole thing as like, oh, okay, interesting, seems like a great opportunity, but I don't know. As someone who's not in crypto, I don't know how to get started, or I don't know what kind of project would make sense for me. And as someone, I'm kind of in the middle. I'm kind of like I'm pretty deep into crypto for some time now, at least like intellectually and socially, and I'm pretty with it. Not like super early or anything, but I understand a lot. I'm fairly technical, and but I'm not like deep into it, so I can kind of understand both sides. And I think even for me, I'm still kind of finding my footing in terms of like as a serious long-term intellectual or creator, whatever you want to call it. I'm still sussing out like what really is the pattern or patterns that will solidify for creators to use these technologies authentically and meaningfully and build real long-term value. It's very confusing and hard to think that through. So I would love to hear any of your intuitions or impressions on how you think creators should look at crypto, especially if they're kind of coming from outside of it, but want to genuinely start building.
So don't listen to what anyone says about like environmental impact and so on. Like there was a tweet the other day where someone was offered $1 million or something to make NFTs and they turned it down because it's like, oh, it's too much of my conscience. It's like, ooh, that money's just going to go to someone else who probably doesn't care about the environment, right? And then the whole talk about like, oh, you're minting something and you're creating this much emissions or so on. It's not a direct thing that happens regardless of you doing the transaction. So there's a lot. There's so much misinformation or like nuance to it that it doesn't really get communicated very well. And so people are like, oh, NFTs are evil, we shouldn't touch them. And then even then there are ways to create them without doing any of that. If you want, like, you can avoid it completely. You can go on Tezos, which is another blockchain that has very low emissions comparatively, or you could just wait. So eventually Ethereum will go proof of stake, and then that'll like reduce by like 2 or 3 magnitudes. And then, yeah, so like if you're artistic, getting into NFTs is a great way to, it's an alternative way to like, so at the moment, online creators, they sort of have like a Patreon model, or they'll make money for ads. Whereas this is like an alternative where you could sell things as if they're like paintings in the real world, right? And they could be valued that way. They could be traded on secondary. And you can get value from, you can get revenue from if they're sold on the secondary market as well, which is something that never happens with like physical objects. So that's a great opportunity. Yeah.
So basically you're saying don't be scrupulous about ethics and just fuck around, make stuff, mint it, sell it, see what happens. Basically, you think people should have less kind of compunction and scrupulosity when it comes to thinking that through. And then also same thing with the environment. Like, that's FUD. Don't worry about it. It's basically what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I definitely that resonates with me, because I actually do feel some hesitation. Like it's such a hype, right? And if you're like doing serious long-term work, you don't want to be like a hype chaser, you know? You don't want to just be like jumping on things because they're hype. And so like I haven't done any NFT project release or any kind of significant effort to like do that. And if I'm being honest, it's really the psychology is like, I don't want to come off like I'm just like chasing money, or like I'm just following a trend, hopping on a bandwagon. But maybe according to you, I'm overthinking it, and I should just be minting stuff and seeing what happens.
Yeah, move fast and break things.
Yeah, that's a good attitude. Thanks for that. Okay, so let's talk about what else you're interested in with respect to kind of the crypto economy. What are your big kind of theses on the market at the moment? I think you're quite an ETH bull. Is that right?
Yes.
Are you are you overweight ETH or what?
Yeah. So primarily, like, ETH is I'm sort of denominating my portfolio in that I want to outperform ETH, so I want to accumulate more ETH in a way. I'm trading against that. I'm not too interested in the ETH competitors, really. A lot of people are worried about ETH being quite slow. Like, that's not a problem the ETH ecosystem has compared to like Bitcoin, because I was very Bitcoin focused. Even when ETH blew up in like 2017, it was like, well, there's all these problems with it. Like, Bitcoin can still catch up. That people are getting ahead of themselves, and then like it did come back down. But then, like a couple of years ago, I put out another chart saying like, well, I want to get heavy into Ether, because what's happening is Bitcoin, it's moved too slowly with the smart contracts, with layer 2, with like adoption of that stuff. No one's using it to do anything interesting, right? All the interesting stuff is on ETH, all the DeFi, all the NFTs, everything. Like Bitcoin, it's not really moving anywhere, and it's very difficult to make it change, which like it's a good thing in some ways, because it makes it it means it's stronger to like attacks from like Bcash or any other outside influence, right? But then it's a bad thing because it doesn't adapt. No one uses it for new things. Like, it's very it can get outdated very quickly. You can see that like the market thinks that because the price of Ethereum against Bitcoin has gone up so much. But then with Ethereum, like, they are, even though the scaling, it's happening, some people aren't too happy with the speed it's happening at. But like, I think what's more important is it has the fee revenue, right? So people are actually burning they're burning ETH, right? They're paying fees to use ETH, which is what matters, right? Because that's where the actual like the supply and demand. If you want a high price of something to be like sustained, then you need that, and like ETH actually has that. Whereas all these other competitors, they don't have people paying to use the chains. Like, a lot of them, so like Tezos, this was my big critique of Tezos. Like, it's great for artists because it's so cheap to use. But the only reason people are using that chain is because they can't afford to use ETH, which isn't a very strong case, like, business-wise, because it's just like people are free riding on it. That's the reason it's popular. And that's sort of the case for a lot of other chains. Like, it doesn't matter that they have this technology that's a bit ahead of ETH, because like ETH will eventually catch up in that regard, I think. And like the people who are like, most of the community, most of the users are on ETH, and they'll stay there. And I'm confident tech-wise it will catch up. So I'm not too worried about the competitors. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So you're not worried about the competitor layer ones. What about in some of the newer projects like Andre Cronje's Phantom, for instance, which I think has the Ethereum virtual machine. Do you think that is interesting or?
So things that use EVM, like they're borrowing a lot of ETH code. I think that really just strengthens ETH as like saying like how powerful it is. Yeah, it's not.
So that's just bullish for ETH. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. And I guess I think I'm hearing that you think the EIP 1559 is key here. Like you think this
yeah, it's good. This new. Yeah. I think like technologically it's not that, it's just a fee burn thing, right? But in terms of like the price, it's great because now you don't have all these miners dumping on you, and you have you have like an ecosystem that like it can support itself, just burning the fees now. So there's supply reduction. With it balances out the inflation finally. So yeah, it's great.
I've heard the argument that if EIP 1559 is almost too good and makes people cling a little bit too much to ETH, does that possibly have the effect of decreasing activity and all of this burgeoning and NFT transactions and that kind of thing? Does that possibly go down if people start hoarding ETH too much?
Well, I think the price will go up as a result of it, right? That's part of my thesis, so that's fine. But I don't think it would. I think the scaling solutions, like they'll arrive in time for it to not be too much of a problem. Like people use LTs anyway, like Matic and so on. They're all built on ETH, so yeah, I don't think it's like on the chain itself, it might be quite expensive, but like it's supposed to be like that on the base layer, right? It's the same with Bitcoin. No one really wants to spend Bitcoin because they think it will go up forever, but that's not really a problem for it.
Gotcha. So you think basically the price of ETH will go up, it will become more a store of value, and there will just be side chains that do all of the transacting. So you'll mint your NFTs and buy and sell your different things in some other token. Do you have a hunch as to which of those you think is the winner, is the kind of the winning side chain?
So Arbitrum just launched, and it's very early days for that. But like I think as people build on that, we'll see. And then you have I think it's Optimism. Is it I can't remember. You have more stuff coming. Yeah, we'll see.
Okay, cool. Maybe we'll talk just a little bit more about NFTs. I'm kind of curious how you see that playing out in the long run. I know you've thought a lot about it, and you have your own project where you basically fractionalized the original Shiba Inu meme, the original Doge, basically the person who owned the original Doge. An NFT was made out of that. You bought it for some ridiculous sum of money, and then you fractionalized it so people could basically buy shares of the verified original Doge. This is the NFD token, not to be mistaken with NFTs. This is NFD. And so tell us
non-fungible dog.
Yeah, non-fungible dog, right? So tell us a little bit about how you, like, what are kind of the larger ideas or hypotheses that are kind of embedded in that led you to do this. Clearly, there's some kind of wager or hypothesis in this about NFTs, about the future of NFTs, about what's worth doing and what's not really worth doing. Talk about that a little bit.
So, even before COVID, like my thesis was like, well, people are spending all their time online now, so it makes sense that digital assets and collectibles, they should see a huge growth in value. Like it was baffling to me that they weren't really worth anything, and then I was more focused on CSGO skins at the time because I think at the time that was the most liquid market for like online collectibles. So I got into that, and I sort of did research into that. I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And then I got more into NFTs. So Urbit was the first one I bought back in 2019. And it just seems like it makes so much sense that these things, like they're going to have value in the future because of how like Web3 is evolving and how people are spending the time and how it's moving into like everyday life. I think like when we have so like AR, I think like AR glasses is probably the next step that like so I know Facebook is doing something already with like camera glasses, but like I think Google Glass will come back at some point in the next 10 years, and like that AR will become a huge part of life, and then NFTs will play a role in that as well. Right, you'll have this like whole metaverse that's definitely coming. So my idea was like, well, I want to sort of be as early as possible for things that might be present in that. So I started looking into like digital collectibles and then NFTs. And then, yeah, when COVID happened, it sort of like proved my point. Like loads of money flowed into collectibles. So it's like, well, this is great. Then like the market sees what I do. So I started spending more and more time on that. And now you have all these like generative projects and stuff popping up. And I think the bubble at the moment is mostly in the generative projects. I think you said the same thing in a blog post recently. So yeah, you have all these things being created that they're generated using like a hash function or something, and they're very cool, but they're very overvalued, I think, because like there'll be increasing complexities of like generative art over time, and there's so much of it to come. But the people are they're valuing the earlier ones very, very highly. I've done quite well trading some of them. But yeah, so I think back to NFT. So NFT, this was lost where I was there. So I bought this NFT of the dog. So the owner, Atsuko Sato, she did an auction on Zora in June for 8 of the pictures she took back in 2010 or something. And the original one sold for like $4 million. And then there was a collection of 7 others. And I bought one for $40,000, which is significantly less. And then I was talking to Trunks. So I'm with this project called Crypto Trunks at the time, and they also bought one. And then eventually I partnered with them, and I fractionalized their dog into shares. So it's like my thinking was NFTs were like blowing up at the time. I was right in my conviction that these things would be worth a lot of money. So how do I capitalize the most on this and also create something that's really interesting, sort of like as an economic experiment? Because like the NFTs themselves weren't valued crazily. Like there wasn't much attention towards them. But then you have things like Dogecoin, and the market cap's like $40 billion. But like really, like socially, what is the difference between the two? Right, Dogecoin, it's sort of like, it's very much just a meme. People trade it for fun. It doesn't, like, technologically, it's not impressive at all. It's just a meme, like, entirely. So the difference between that and the value of the NFT I bought it's magnitude. So it's like, well, why don't I turn this into a coin itself and then create a community around that? And then, yeah, so it blew up. And then that went to, I think the highest valuation was like $100 million at the top, which is incredible. And then the people who bought the original Doge image, there's also fractionalized theirs now. That's worth about 200 million at the time. So yeah, people are sort of experimenting with that, and we're really seeing like how. So when you fractionalize something, it sort of changes how the liquidity works for the artwork. Because when you sell artwork, normally you're selling the entire thing, but now because you're selling pieces of it, it's interesting to see. Like it can sort of inflate the value, because some people they'll hold on to it beyond, like if they owned the whole thing, they'd sell it for that price. But then if they only own a part of it, there's sort of like maybe like from their risk management side, they're like, I don't really need to rebalance or sell it. I don't need the money, because they don't own the whole thing. They only own a small part of it. And then everyone does that. So they'll hold it for a high price than they would do normally. So you have insane valuations on these pieces, which is, yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to see how people behave when they own a piece of these things instead of the whole thing. And then, so what I've done recently is I'm dropping to all of the holders of the fractional pieces. I'm dropping them another token. And this the largest holder in it is Atsuko Sato, the owner of the dog. So my thinking is I've made it really well distributed, so there are no like whales. Like if you have loads of coins in the existing ones like myself, then you don't get a huge stake in it. It's very small, so it's very well distributed between like all of the holders, except for Atsuko. She has like 2 or 3%. So you can go and claim this if you owned it, and it's sort of like a derivation of the current community. Like you have this provenance because the tokens are connected to the original images, but realistically, I don't think either of those will ever be unfractionalized, because in order to do that, you'd have to pay the buyout price, which is like a ridiculous amount, because all the people who own it are like, oh, I'd only sell it for this amount, right? If they had to. So the buyout prices are so high, these images will probably never be unfractionalized. So my thinking is like, well, there's been a big like debate between like community The other party that fractionalized theirs, Pleaser DAO, they don't have as many holders as me, despite having the bigger coin, and like there's a lot of VCs, and so there's a lot of talk about like VCs against like actual community. NFT has a more active community, so I'm like, well, if I can like bridge these two together, so I've dropped everyone a token. It's fairly distributed. It's signed by the person who I think deserves the money the most, like the largest holder. Like it makes sense to me. She should have it. So yeah, and now the community they're all getting that for free. And then like, well, if they want to build things together, then they can go and use that, and it should benefit people more fairly, I think. And like, even though it's not directly backed by the NFT itself, I don't think the original tokens. I want to see how much people care about that, right? If that makes sense, right? If it's benefiting her, whereas the other ones aren't. They're benefiting me who bought the NFT quite cheap, and they're benefiting the VCs who bought the other one, right? Whereas like this one, it will benefit her directly, and also the community more equally because people have an equal share. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Okay, interesting. I feel like what I'm hearing from your worldview generally is, it sounds like you're bearish on things that are disconnected from reality and programmatic, and you're more bullish on things that are linked to individual people, linked to real world historical events. It sounds like, because you were saying that you think the generative art is maybe overvalued, and that's going to eventually all kind of wash out as a kind of generic commodity, whereas it seems like you think stuff that real people are making or doing that has flesh and blood involved, kind of focusing on that and seizing that is where the real long-term value is in the NFT world. Is that broadly your thesis?
Yeah, absolutely. I think generative stuff, it will saturate. The earlier stuff should be worth more, just because it's like early to NFTs, like it makes sense for that stuff. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
fascinating.
Like there's so many generative projects. It's crazy. There are some generative ones that will still do all that. Like if they're linked to like if they do something novel, or like if they look cool. Back to like Frog Twitter. I think someone from Frog Twitter made something called Miladies. If you've heard of that.
Oh really? No.
And, I didn't even know. I didn't even know when I bought it, and then it turns out it was Mia Blackheart or something. Is that, I can't remember the account exactly. But yeah.
Oh, really? Okay, interesting. Wait, yeah, I'm going to look into that. That's an interesting lead. I didn't know anything about that. All right, fascinating. So, all right. How do you think about the laws around unregistered securities? Is this something you're just like, is this just like, you don't worry about it? No one should really care too much about that. Or do you look at that critically and you do your projects with sensitivity towards that? Like, because so for people listening who might not know, I mean, the SEC has signaled here and there, maybe they are not crazy about people selling things in crypto land that could arguably be called unregistered securities. Of course, it's illegal to sell unregistered securities, and some different types of assets and projects in crypto space arguably could be alleged to be unregistered securities selling. So I know some people who are quite worried about that, like they don't want to do these different types of crypto experiments, or they're very cautious about it because they think there's a non-trivial risk, like the man could crack down on that in some kind of aggressive way. And then there are some people who seem like completely unfazed by that, and they're just like, crypto is this new thing. You should just have fun, try different things. And a lot of people in that camp are kind of more, their reasoning is often, this is so big now, the cat's out of the bag. There's no way law enforcement is going to be able to like go and prosecute like everyone who's selling tokens. And it's kind of, the ship has sailed, and not to worry about that kind of thing. How do you think about that question?
So recently, like, there's been some SEC crackdown on DeFi protocols, which is kind of insane because it's like the main one is Uniswap. They're going after the Uniswap team, I think, because that's the main DEX, decentralized exchange that people use, and so they're trying to regulate the team, but like the code's already out there, and then there's plenty of other copies of it, and it's like it doesn't. I don't really understand what the aim is, right? Because like they can stop further development of it, but this thing can never. It's on Ethereum forever, right? They'd have to like close off on ramp. They'd have to kill the entire industry if they actually wanted to regulate it, right? So I think, Yeah, and there's so many people in it as well. Like the amount of resources they need to go after every single person it's mind-boggling. It's like it's impossible, really. Yeah, so I think especially like if you're smaller, like in terms of capital as well, like there's nothing to worry about. It's not at all. When it came to NFD can be considered a security. So I had to talk to a lawyer about that, but yeah, I'm not really worried about it too much.
Okay, so interesting. So you did consider this, and you even went as far as talking to a lawyer. And what was the outcome of that discussion with the lawyer? How do you see the NFD project if you acknowledge that one could arguably allegedly call it? Yeah.
Yeah, I fractionalize it through a site called fractional.art. And like I think most of the liability goes onto them because they offer the service of fractionalizing things and they offer to sell it to people. And then like because I'm not even an American, I'm from the UK myself, so like I don't know anything about US securities laws. It's like, well, do they expect every single person in the world to take account like another country's laws? Like it's interesting. Like I don't think it's possible for them to go after everyone. It seems that like the overreach there would be incredible. So yeah, I don't think, especially early on, I don't think people should worry about it. It's
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that perspective. I mean, because I have been thinking a lot about it and paying close attention to it. And it does seem to me, I mean, my personal view is that a project such as NFD, where you're fractionalizing an asset and people can buy basically a share in something, it's not a share in, it's not an unregistered security because it has either governance purpose or kind of utility purpose. That's kind of my understanding, is that if it has governance or utility, then it's not an investment asset. It's something that you buy for intrinsic reasons. And sure, it may or may not appreciate in value over time. And maybe that's something that people are potentially interested in. But if you're not like promising people it's going to appreciate over time, then I think it's not selling an unregistered security.
Yeah, I've been very careful about like being realistic with people. But when I talked to the lawyer, what he said was like people, they've fractionalized real world collectibles in the past as well online. I can't remember the site he talked about, but like basically it was ruled that like if you're buying a fraction of a collectible, generally the only reason you would do that is as an investment. So I think that's the argument they use. But like there's a lot more nuance when it comes to digital things, because there's so much more you can do with the fractions, right? Like
Right. So this historical practice of fractionalizing collectibles, which is not new to crypto. So you're saying that was never considered an unregistered security?
That is considered a security.
Oh, yeah. It is. So people who do that are registered securities dealers, basically.
Yeah, they have to be. Yeah.
And so, sorry, just not to harp on this too long, but I'm just very interested in, since you talked with a lawyer, I want to get the details. So why then is fractionalizing an NFT different?
Well, this is the thing. It's not being specifically ruled. Like in the UK, it's fine. It's not considered security or anything. In the US, but yeah, as I said, like people, the only reason it would be considered you'd buy a fraction of a collectible is because you want it to be an investment. So yeah, so the fractionalized NFTs should be considered collectibles in his mind when I talked to him. But like, yeah, you can do other things, right? So you can use, say you own a stake. Something I do is if you own 10 million of the NFT, then you get into a Discord. This is like a little fun chat room. Right. Yeah. So you can do things like that with it,
which gives it utility. And then it's not an investment asset. It's just a token that gets you something that you want. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Interesting. That was very illuminating. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about Urbit. You mentioned Urbit a couple times, which was interesting to me. I didn't necessarily know that you had anything to do with Urbit or that you were interested in Urbit. So as you alluded to, it's something I've become more bullish on. I'm quite interested in the project. I think it's a lot of people are sleeping on it, and it's still quite undervalued. How do you think about the appeal of Urbit? How do you think about what in your perspective is the bull case for Urbit?
Right. So I've owned it for a couple of years, and in terms of NFTs, it's done very badly in terms of performance. The development's pretty slow, but it's very interesting. So there aren't really any other NFTs out there that are doing the same thing. Like it's definitely like in its own world. I think it's very ahead of the curve in the fact that like you have like your own ID that you own, and it gives you access to this network. I'm a little worried about the topology of the network. Like there's only 256 galaxies, and like that sort of limits how decentralized it can be, I think. So I'm not sure if they'll change that at any point, but having like scarcity of ideas, that's a great idea to like, it sort of funds. Well, I imagine they, it's a secure network, but also like it's how they raised funding back in, I think it was 2017. It was like, well, we have scarce ideas, so people buy, like they buy portions of that, and then that's how, that's how they raise capital. But yeah, so it's a great idea. Like, you talk about like sovereignty and having your own like nations, like your own state in the sky, or all that stuff. It's very free. It's very free having like owning all this infrastructure, and your own ID and your own network and everything. It's this ideal that a lot of people are after, but they're just not aware of it. It's kind of painful. I'm surprised it's not more popular. It's really taking a while to catch on, but I think people get there sooner than later. Yeah.
Right on. Yeah, that's kind of how I see it too. I'm curious, like for people out there listening, they might be wondering if they should start like trading altcoins to, make a lot of money in their early 20s. And I'm a little curious on your perspective on how kind of the crypto economy has changed. It seems like a lot of the energy has moved away from, looking for the next 100x altcoin, speculating on like the next big NFT set. For people who are interested in potentially trading or potentially just, getting involved in crypto, what do you think are the most interesting or exciting opportunities for new people kind of coming into the space? We obviously talked a little bit about NFTs for creators, and I agree that that's really attractive. But maybe we'll talk a little bit more about the trading end of things. Like, are you still looking for like the 100x altcoins? Is that still a game you play? Is that a game other people should find interesting, or is that completely over? How do you think about the most kind of interesting asymmetric bets in crypto?
So as the market's grown, I think it does become more difficult for you to, like, if you're on exchanges, it's more difficult to find like 100x's and so on. Or like it's a lot more liquid now. So all of these opportunities are sort of like absorbed by VCs and so on. I am still trading altcoins, but nowhere near as actively as I used to. So Mina is one I really like at the moment. It uses ZK snarks. If you know about them, Zcash uses them. It's for private transactions, and that's something. There's a lot of potential in that in the future, right? People, it's really undervalued, I think. Like the privacy it brings, because it's perfect. Like you have things like Monero. People use Monero for the dark web and so on, right? But Monero is not perfect, like mathematically, whereas like ZK snarks are, they're completely private. And then there's all sorts of things like, so you can use them for scaling as well. You can use them for all sorts of private transactions, and like, yeah, there's like it opens up a whole new world. Yeah, in cryptography, really, there's so many things like we'll discover you can use them for. So one thing on ETH, they've combined them with like NFTs, and you can create games, and using the zero knowledge proof, you can create aspects of the game that like no one knows. And so like there's no way anyone can cheat with the game, right? It's like, which like maybe that sounds quite simple, but like it's a huge, it's just one use case of it, and like, yeah, people are working on that. I think that'll be big at some point. Yeah, that's definitely something I'd look into if you knew. But if you want, so let's say you start with like a small amount of money. Yeah, a few months ago, I definitely would have said NFTs, like they're the best place. You can flip them very easily. Like there's great risk reward. If something has momentum, you can ride it quite easily. Now, like the space is saturated quite a lot. Like there's so many new projects. It's always very dangerous when that happens. So like I wouldn't be buying new generative projects now, because like there's like the share of the space they have, the attention they get, like it's very small. It's very risky. if you have like a small amount of money, I'd go to like other chains. So like Ethereum competitors in their ecosystems. That's probably where the best opportunities are. Because also like when you're trading on ETH has huge fees. So if you don't have a lot of capital, it can really eat into the fees. And that can be quite damaging. Whereas if you go onto like AVAX or Sol or Tezos, there's not huge fees, but people are they're building on there. The NFT ecosystem on Tezos is amazing. So like I think if you want NFT opportunities to like trade, it's definitely on there at the moment. You've got a larger margin because there's no fees. And, yeah.
Okay, interesting. And how do you think about the social token phenomenon, these kind of tokenized communities? I don't know if you would have noticed recently communities like the Friends with Benefits community, which is blowing up. That token value has skyrocketed recently. And, for people listening, this is just basically, creators and kind of community leaders who are launching their own ERC20 tokens. So fungible, kind of branded fungible tokens that are specific to communities and identities. And the real value of the token is mostly it gets you access into some kind of club or group or community and other kinds of benefits. That being kind of the main purpose and function of these tokens. Do you think that's here to stay? Is that really interesting and big in the long term, or is that just a fad? What do you think about this?
So these things have been tried. So like there was one back in 2014. Someone tried exactly the same thing. It's not particularly a new idea, but it's definitely caught on more like within the Ethereum ecosystem because Web3 itself is growing. So it's very easy to integrate it into things now. So I think that's why they're becoming more popular. In terms of like investment, I'm not really sure. It's not something I'd go for necessarily, but it's definitely, it's interesting building a community. So it's something I'm doing with NFT. Like if you own 10 million, then you get into the Discord and then that could be quite fun. So it does create new demand for these tokens and on top of what would normally
in
be.
the NFT community. Like what is that community about? What do they talk about? Dogs?
Anything.
They talk about their
whatever they want.
Okay. Yeah. Because I mean, do you sometimes find that the word community is somewhat it's somewhat of a euphemism at this point? Like people talk about the importance of community, and then you look into these like communities, and it's like, what is it really a community, or is it just people who are like kind of really hungry and greedy for like more money around some object, right? It's like absolutely. You know what I mean? It's like all the people.
So
go ahead.
Sorry. If you go into like most of the dog coins or something like Shiba Inu, like it would just be people like pumping the price, or like they'll just be posting bullish things all the time, and it's very cool, like very Ponzi scheme, like MLM, like BitConnect. If you remember that, like very very similar vibes to that. Most of them will be like that because people they just want to make money on their investment, and they also want to sort of trick everyone else into holding beyond that. Well, yeah. So you have that sometimes, but then. You want to stay clear of those ones. And then you'll have like, so the one I've built, mostly it's just like people who like my Twitter personality. So they just hang out there. They post memes and whatever. They're quite nice. They're very funny. And there's not too much price talk.
Gotcha. Right. Yeah. So in the better cases, it's really just kind of like vibing and kind of friends hanging out, basically. Yeah.
And people building things as well. So yeah.
Right on. Okay. Cool. I appreciate that perspective. All right. Well, I don't want to keep you too long, but I guess I think the just the final things I might want to pick your brain about just have to do with the long-term future. Like I'm just kind of curious how you think all of this shakes out in the very long term, because there's all this kind of chaos. There's so many different projects kind of rising super big really quickly, then disappearing, and there's just so much experimentation in the space. So I was just kind of curious if you had any other kind of final thoughts on what you're most excited about in the future. Let's start with the space generally, like if anything comes to mind. And then I might ask you a little bit more about like yourself and your own projects. So what about the space in general in the long term?
So I think Bitcoin will lose top spot probably to Ethereum at some point. I think that's very likely. And I think Ethereum, it's not guaranteed, but I think Ethereum is most likely going to be the main like smart contract chain people use. And then also, as I said, I think ZK Snarks will see a lot more use. So I'm bullish on Zcash and bullish on Mina. I'm very interested in those projects. And then NFTs definitely here to stay. But if you want, they're more as a benefit to people who create art and things like that, rather than for people like investing in them. It's a lot more difficult. You're more likely to get burned from the demand. So like if you're buying NFTs, you should treat them like any other collectible, right? You should only buy them if you like really like them. They actually mean something to you. And like the ones like that, those will hold the value the best over time, or like the older ones as well. So like CryptoPunks, that's what's safest if you want to invest in something like that.
Right. Okay. And so I think you alluded to, do you agree with this idea that ETH is going to flip in Bitcoin? Did you allude to that a moment ago?
Yes. Yeah.
So you do subscribe.
Absolutely.
You subscribe to that thesis. So do you think Bitcoin is here to stay in a non-trivial way, or do you think, yeah?
Yeah, I think Bitcoin will definitely stay around. So like, because I've been in the space for a long, long time. So I was around when the Ethereum ICO happened, and like I decided not to buy it because people were like, "Oh, it has all these problems. Oh, Bitcoin will scale and it won't matter. Like we won't need altcoins for anything." So I sort of believed that for a while. But then, yeah, as over time, as like Ethereum's developed and like Bitcoin hasn't gone anywhere, it's like, well, yeah, it's kind of hard to hold that belief still. So I think it makes more sense that Ethereum should be on top because that's what people are really using. Bitcoin will stay around. It doesn't. You also have the environmental narrative, right? When Ethereum does move to proof of stake, it has this huge advantage, like socially over Bitcoin, because Bitcoin will still be spending all this electricity on proof of work, but Ethereum won't be using any of that energy. So we'll see how that affects the market and how people treat it as well. Yeah.
Well, it's been super interesting hearing your perspective. I would love to maybe just know a little bit more about you and what's next for you. I mean, you have a lot of capital. You are a really young guy with your whole life ahead of you. I'm just kind of curious what you don't have to give me some kind of strong answer, like I'm, breathing down your neck asking you, what are you going to do with your life? But I'm just curious, like what's going through your mind as the next big place for you? Are you thinking about maybe building a company, or maybe, I don't know, going all in as an influencer and building your media brand? What most excites you personally for your short to medium term future?
Well, I want to keep building with like the NFT community, see where that goes. I'm also working with CryptoTrunks, so they do like carbon negative NFTs, and they're doing lots of fun technical stuff. I want to see where, because NFTs can do so many things, like that we've barely scratched the surface of what they're capable of, right? So I really want to like expand on that. That's something I'm very interested in. And then, yeah, so capital-wise, I'll see where my investments go. I am sort of interested. So I dropped out of university when I was 18. So that's part of me kind of wants to see if like learning like academic economics, that will give me any new insights onto how things could work, and maybe developing that in that sense. So that's something I could do in my future as well. But yeah, so mostly focus on NFTs for now, I think.
Okay, awesome. Very cool. Well, thanks for coming on, and thanks for all the free alpha.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for all the free alpha. This is really fun. And yeah. Hey, thank you so much for listening to the podcast. You made it all the way to the very end, so you must really like the show. In that case, I would be super grateful if you'd be so kind to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. All you have to do is go to otherlife.co/review. That's otherlife.co/review. And it'll send you to Apple Podcasts. Just leave a review. You can be honest. Tell me what you really think. I'd really appreciate it because it'll help other people find the show, and I'm really trying to grow out the podcast. So thanks for listening, and thank you for leaving a review. I really appreciate it.